The top business stories live from the Sky Newsroom. A little disturbance. Donald Trump lays down global market reaction to his trade tariffs. The new plant in Sunderland that's converting old tyres into aviation fuel. Plus, is a minimum spend the best way for restaurants to deter so-called reservation squatters? Very good afternoon on this Wednesday, Business Live, with me, Darren McCaffrey. Well, according to Donald Trump, his trade tariffs will lead to a little disturbance in the markets, but it won't be much. What they will do, he said, though, is make America rich. But the question today is, will he stick with them? Because Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary says an announcement on the tariffs, goods from Mexico and Canada, will be made later, with speculation that they could actually be reduced. Let's speak about all of this with Martin Wolf, Chief Economics Commentator at the Financial Times and author of the book, The Crisis of Democratic Capitalism. Very good afternoon to you, Martin. I suppose the first question is that the markets had kind of thought that Donald Trump would use tariffs as a negotiating tactic, not necessarily impose them, and yet he has.
Yes, well, I don't regard markets as particularly good forecasters of politics. Why should they be? They don't know any more about what's in Donald Trump's head than you or I know, which is basically very little. He loves tariffs and he loves being unpredictable. And that means that we can assume that he is going to use them. He's going to use them a great deal in unpredictable and erratic ways. He may start reducing them again. He may double them again. I wouldn't be prepared to bet. The one thing we do know is that the trading environment in terms of trade with the United States, which is not the biggest trader in the world, but a very big one and the biggest economy, has become wildly unpredictable. And that affects all businesses that are dependent to a significant degree on trade, and that, of course, must affect profitability of businesses and should affect markets.
Justin Trudeau called these tariffs dumb yesterday. I think I read in your piece in the FT that you said Donald Trump is economically illiterate. Why? What do you think? I know you said you don't know what's going on in his head. What do you think his rationale may well be, or is there a rationale?
I think there are a few broad, profound emotions in his head. First of all, he associates, because tariffs with prosperity, and that's because the period of, arguably, the period of fastest growth of the US economy, which was between the Civil War and the First World War, so the late 19th, early 20th centuries, were periods of very high tariff protection. There were also periods of enormous immigration and enormous innovation. And it's a big question among economists whether tariffs really added very much. But there was an association. So he looks back to that period and he says, we boomed when we had tariffs, so if we put them on now, it necessarily follows we'll boom again. The second reason, it doesn't follow, but that's the argument. The second reason is he's instinctively in favor of what economists call autarky, which is self-sufficiency. He doesn't really like trade because he doesn't really like foreigners. He wants to make America a fortress, independent and self-sufficient, producing everything for itself. He doesn't believe in the virtues of commerce, of comparative advantage, all these other ideas. So these two emotions go together. And finally, he thinks they're a great cudgel with which to beat weaker countries like Canada and Mexico, the EU, I think to some degree too, though that's not going to work with China. And for these three reasons, the whole idea of tariffs excites him.
In saying that, Martin, as you kind of rightly pointed out there, this is not just about economics, is it, for President Trump? I mean, if you look at the reasons he's given for places like Canada and Mexico, it's got to do with migration and fentanyl. We saw him do something quite similar with Colombia. I think, as you've also just suggested, he's not a big fan of the EU as a political institution, not just an economic one. And that's why it's really complex and different, because this is simply not just about economics, is it?
Yes, I think the key point is he wants to bully countries. It's his natural temperament. He says to himself, we are the most powerful country in the world. We should be able to do whatever we like. Now, how do we get countries to fall in line? To his credit, I would say, and I say this rather reluctantly, he doesn't want to do the old-fashioned imperialist thing, which is to send in armies. He seems to be genuinely quite averse to starting wars, and I prove that. We should. But then he says, well, how do we bully them if we're not going to send in armies? Well, the obvious thing to do is attack their trade. And some countries, like Canada and Mexico, are very vulnerable because their exports to America represent a huge proportion of their trade, but even more significantly of their GDP. Canada's case, exports to the United States about a fifth of GDP. So this is a really big amount. They can adjust for that. The effect on the economy will be much smaller, but that's really important. So he thinks we can beat these people up. With China and the EU, this is simply not going to work. He might have to go for other tools. But I think the basic point about it, in addition to loving protection as an idea, self-sufficiency, he just thinks this is a great way of beating other countries up and getting them to do what we want.
Yeah, indeed. I think he did say with Greenland, though, was it one way or another? And we'll see what happens there, Martin. I think my final big question to you is, it's a much broader one and quite a deep one. There's a lot of people in the last couple of weeks, in newsrooms even, up and down the country and indeed in Europe, suggesting this is the fall of the West, of the liberal economic order as we've known it. Quite profound things, that this is a genuine turning point in history. What is your sense of that? Do you really think this is a really profound moment for the world, or something, you know what, that'll breeze by and in a decade's time won't really have made much difference?
My bet is that it is a turning point, and I think so for two other reasons. There's a very profound change going on in the way the Americans govern themselves. The government in DC is going to be different at the end of this, not in good ways. And the second, it's very clear that their international relations have changed. What is happening to Ukraine in the last few days is a profound transformation. Previously, we would have taken it for granted the US would support a weak democracy against a bully like Russia. That doesn't seem to be the case. But even in terms of trade, yes, of course it's significant, because if you don't know how the US, the most important country in the West, is going to behave on trade from day to day, the commitments that you would want to make in the world trade and in investments and all the rest of it just become wildly uncertain. And that was not the case up to now. In that fundamental sense, this is a turning point, because restoring trust in the United States, which is crucial, and therefore in the system, won't be just a matter of replacing Trump, which may happen at some point in the future. It's bound to happen, given his age. But then the people ask, well, what will the next US be like? Will it be like the old one or not? I think the answer is we don't know. And so this is now a different world.
OK, fascinating stuff. And Martin, we really appreciate your analysis this afternoon. That's Martin Wolf there from the FT. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Now, US stock markets tumbled yesterday following the opening salvos of that global trade war. But let's have a look at how the markets are doing this afternoon. Let's speak to Janet Mui, who is head of market analysts at Brewin Dolphin. Very good afternoon to you, Janet. There you are. Hello. Janet, things are a bit more stable today.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, the U.S. market opened positively to start with, but I think it starts to struggle midway. I guess there's still a lot of concerns on a trade tariff front, still a lot of flip-flopping by the Trump administration. And I think people are anticipating tomorrow's employment result from the U.S., which, you know, as we know, there's more concerns on U.S. growth at the moment. So I guess traders are still kind of staying put at the moment. But as you say, there is a bit of stabilization.
One thing that has, though, changed is the dollar. we're just looking at the European markets, by the way, which are up. I think the FTSE is down just a fraction. But the dollar really has taken a bit of a whack. Sterling up at 129, which it's not been to for a very long time. A very long time as in maybe 4 or 5 months ago.
Yes, absolutely. I think the euro and sterling has risen very sharply today, the highest in a couple of months. I think the reason is because there seems to be some dramatic shift in terms of fiscal spending in Europe. Particularly, the new German government has pledged more defense spending and trying to ask other EU member states to also relax its fiscal rules in order to spend more on defense. So I guess this is a new source of demand and potentially a hope for renewed manufacturing and industrial activity in the region. And I think that is why I think analysts are more excited about the growth prospects for the region and thereby supporting the currency. Interesting.
And just very finally, Janet, the very fact is markets are going to kind of have to get used to this, aren't they? Because we're expecting potentially another announcement on tariffs this evening. We don't know what it is, but it will almost certainly have an impact either way. And that means markets having to deal with this almost roller coaster ride on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. That's true. We have seen quite a few flip-flops already, right? Just a day or two ago, President Trump said there's no room for negotiation in terms of Canada and Mexican tariff. But then today we may see an announcement that there may be some relief. And also we are still going to get tariffs on other regions, for example, the reciprocal tariffs, right? So there is still so much uncertainty. And the other thing is we don't know the duration of these tariffs and whether they're getting worse. But I think one thing is for sure is that the prime target is China, right? Because so far the tariffs that have been enacted that follow through for sure is China. That adversary is not going to go away.
That's the one that is going to continue almost certainly throughout the entire presidency of Donald Trump. Janet, really appreciate your analysis as always. Janet Mooey there. Thank you. Now, diners at some of London's top restaurants have been asked to spend £100 just to book a table. It's a kind of minimum charge that's been brought in to deter so-called reservation squatters following a rise in cancellations and no-shows. Well, let's speak to Marcus Teslev, who is founder and chief executive of the Teslev Group, which owns a number of high-end restaurants and bars in the capital. Marcus, very good afternoon to you. Just give us a sense of how big this is and the impact it has on hospitality. This is people essentially either failing to turn up at a restaurant having made a booking or turning up sometimes and frankly not spending very much.
Hi, Darren. Thank you for having me. Yeah, look, it's a significant problem, especially on the higher end and more popular restaurants, bars. It's been getting progressively worse after COVID. I think we have to look at it from a bigger picture as well. Essentially, I think hospitality has evolved and is now entertainment. It's no longer just going to a restaurant, and where time is the new luxury. So we have to keep that attention for people. We have to offer creating memories and experiences for people in the service that we give. So people paying for real estate and for that show or for that experience. And I think there's a lot of people that are taking that for granted. But if you were to go to a concert or if you were to go to book a theater ticket or go watch your favorite DJ, even a hotel, you'd be expected to do a deposit or prepay. And in fact, it's been going on in our industry actually for many, many years in reality. If you go to omakase or Michelin star restaurants or any of those kind of restaurants, you would normally pay a deposit or a booking fee or a prepayment. So with technology being what it is, a lot of people are able now to access restaurants a lot easier. And then, a lot of people don't have the intention to ever turn up even, or they try to resell them, which is also very unfair.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who just essentially book lots of restaurants, don't they? Decide which one they want to go at the last minute and maybe don't cancel. But I think what I would say is different from a concert, for example, or a different event, is that because the suggestion from some restaurants is that they want to have a minimum charge on your bill that you spend enough to get to £100, for example. Yeah. But if you turn up and you're not hungry, you're not hungry. I mean, that's the difference, isn't it, between that and other forms of hospitality?
Well, I don't know. I mean, look, if you look at across the board, if you go to a cinema, you pay for your ticket, right? Whereas if you go to a show, if you go, you're going to spend time somewhere, right? And we've got to give you an experience worthy of that. We pay, top rents. We pay business rates, VAT, salaries. We have all these input costs, and they're just doing this at the moment, especially post-COVID, post-Brexit. We've got to find a way that we don't punish the real good regular guests. But with people taking up seats and not turning up, we still have to pay the salaries. The food goes in the bin, so that's not sustainable long term from an environmental point of view. There's just all these negatives. So to be fair to people, I think the right thing to do is to have, whether it's a minimum spend or some sort of a confirmation or ticketed event. I think that works. And are you really going to go to a top restaurant with a several weeks waiting list to get a table if you're not really intending to eat there? Especially if you got a big taste, 10, 15 course tasting menu as an example. You're paying for real estate.
Yeah, and just very finally, what is the health of the market like? I mean, there's been a lot of focus on the nighttime economy, on the fact that people are eating earlier.
Yeah,
there's been criticism of London in the past, in particular, about its position as an international city. What's your sense of where the market is at still relatively the start of 2025?
I think that's a great question. I think it's not as buoyant as people think it is from a nighttime economy point of view. The late night venues are really, really suffering for a number of reasons, not least because people are drinking less, right? People are looking for healthier lifestyles. But also, London was I still think it's the capital of food in the world, but it also was this late night capital. And I think we've lost some of that jazz, some of that excitement and pizzazz, which is a shame.
And we like a bit of jazz, there's no doubt about that. Marcus, thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for caring about us. Thank you.
Cheers. OK, you're watching Business Live here on Sky News. Coming up next, a new plant in Sunderland that's converting old tyres into aviation fuel. We'll be explaining how up next.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We start with breaking news. Historic day here today.
The golden age of America begins right now.
A long-awaited ceasefire is now underway.
First question, Sky News.
This is a huge moment.
It's incredible.
Now to California.
Do you owe citizens an apology? Have you nothing to say?
Jane Secker, Sky News. Would you like to respond to us now?
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
In principle, would you agree to do that?
Criticism of you is banned. How is this a fair election?
The cameras are poised, waiting to see what the president might do next.
Thank you. Thank you all.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash.
Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, the full story first. I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
This is insane. This was a bustling residential area.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa.
How difficult is this to police tonight? Off the scale.
I'm Dan Whitehead, Sky News' West of England and Wales correspondent.
We're going to do this 100 times every day for the next 3 months.
Why have we agreed to this?
Raises many questions about many things.
Actually seeing people impacted, she was so upset.
It was powerful. They kind of couldn't believe they were being berated here.
Very much on my terms, I think was the subtext. News happens fast around Donald Trump.
It was a kind of wow moment.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, doesn't it?
It's Trump world, and we just live in it.
So, where next?
Follow Trump 100 wherever you get your podcasts.
Sky News get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
It's really dangerous.
Many people have died riding it.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
It's like Emirates. It's like better. It's like Emirates. It's like better.
Now, every year, millions of old cars' tyres end up in landfill, but there is a Norwegian company, Wastefront, which says it can convert 10 million of them into aviation fuel. I've been speaking to the company's chief executive.
Basically, you take the tires, you shred them into pieces. By shredding them, you can separate the metal that's in the tire, and then you're left with the rubber part of the tire and a powder of carbon that's called carbon black. You heat the whole thing and you separate the rubber, which is vaporized, from the carbon black. The carbon black you recycle into a tire. The vaporized rubber you then condense and transform ultimately into sustainable aviation fuel.
Quite something. Sounds very smart indeed. And this is a problem, isn't it, in the sense that we've got a lot of tyres out there?
Yeah, it's an unknown problem, largely unknown problem. But in the UK alone, we generate 50 million tires of waste tires per year, of which we are exporting 80% to be incinerated at best, because we don't have a solution domestically.
Wow, that is quite a stat, actually, when you think about it. But as you say, this is a relatively good news story in the sense that you're not just doing something that is sustainable, but creating jobs too.
Yes, it ticks various boxes. It creates jobs, highly qualified jobs, because as you can imagine, when you picture transforming a tire into these clean fuels, there is some expertise behind it. So highly qualified jobs. We are helping solve this waste tire problem. We're helping solving the emissions from aviation problem. And also these solutions that we're bringing is actually domestic. So all the jobs, as you say, are domestic, and the feedstock is domestic. We don't depend from foreign feedstocks or jobs.
And you're talking about pumping, I think, £100 million in Sunderland initially. Is that the plan?
Yes. Sunderland is the first step. It was a great location to start with, very good logistics. We are inside the port of Sunderland in an industrial area, so logistics is excellent. Sunderland also has a great industrial heritage, so it's easy to find engineering capabilities, construction capabilities. So yes, Sunderland has been selected by us as the first step of this much larger network in which we will transform waste tires into SAF, sustainable aviation fuel.
There you go. Let's just bring you up to date with some breaking news coming into us at Sky involving Ukraine. We've just heard that President Zelensky's top aide has said he has had a discussion with the US's security advisor to achieve peace, and also suggesting that they have agreed to meet in the near future. So that is the latest coming out from Kyiv. Mark Austin will have more, of course, on that at the news hour coming up at 5 o'clock. Stay tuned for that. As for Business Life, back tomorrow morning at 11:30. Do join me then if you can. Until then, have a nice evening and goodbye.